I want to thank Peter Barberie and Shikeith for being here, and James for working on curating the show. James Britt is our curator here at Tilt, and he's going to take it over from here.
Thank you, Sarah. How's everybody doing tonight? Very good. Thank you for coming out. We'll do a brief introduction. The conversation is going to last about 40 minutes, and then there'll be a you to ask questions, and maybe the artists will stick around a little bit, but we do have dinner plans, so. And he's hungry as well. So Shikeith has been excellent to work with. This is an incredible opportunity to work with you. The exhibition's great, so yes, I've really enjoyed it. So Shikeith received his BA in Creative Arts from Penn State, his MFA from Yale. He is a native son of Philadelphia, but currently resides in Pittsburgh. And Peter Barberie is also local. Peter is the Brodsky Curator of Photographs and head of prints, drawings, and photographs at the Philadelphia Art Museum. So, yeah, I got it. So I'm gonna turn it over to Peter and to Shikeith.
Thank you, James. Is this on? Can you all hear me? Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thank you, James. Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here at Tilt. It's great to see everybody here tonight. Most of all, thank you, Shikeith, because this show is incredible.
Thank you.
I really love it. This is my 4th or 5th time spending time with your pictures, and it's just been rewarding. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight. And I'm just going to dive in and start to ask you questions. That's my job. But mostly I'm going to try to shut up and so that Shikeith can talk to us about his work. So I'm the facilitator here tonight so that we can hear from this artist. And we did have a great conversation earlier in the week just to get to know each other a little bit better. And some really interesting things came up. So I'm going to build on some of those.
Okay.
So first, let's talk about pictures that are hard to see. Because one thing I really love about this whole show is that some of the pictures are very dark. Some of the pictures have different things going on other than what's in front of you in the screen. For instance, Visiting Hours, which is kind of an iconic picture for the show, which is on that wall right over there. You've talked about how that was an accident. The film was fogged, and you decided that was actually a great gift. Other pictures, especially Phantasmatic Apparatus, which is around the corner, have a lot of digital noise, sort of grainy noise, which I also really like. And then, as I said, many of the pictures are dark. And that's true, I think, throughout all of your work, not just in the show here. So this is all intentional, and tell us about it. Tell us what's going on with these decisions you make.
Yeah, well, the darkness is intentional. Growing up, I was one of those kids that was deeply afraid of the dark. I grew up in a house with a grandmother who was deeply spiritual as well, and she would tell me a lot of ghost stories, a lot of UFO stories, and it scared me. Like, I would sit in my room, which was the middle room in North Philly, shout out North Philly, and I could not sleep in my bedroom. And so, because in the dark, my imagination would go wild. I would see any and everything coming after me, and I really just, I like to reference a lot of those personal experiences whenever I'm trying to build a language or grammar around the work that I make. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us in here could probably relate to being afraid of the dark as a child because of what we saw, what we didn't see, and what we imagined, what was obscured, concealed, and where that took us. So in terms of photographs, I'm like thinking about memories that are at a distance, or memories that are not mine, and that's like foggy, right? And so I'm like, how do I like start to create compositions around just like memories that have that are distorted, that are dislocated, and that's sort of where it begins to sort of lean into why I'm creating these images that are really dark. But then there's also other sort of aesthetic strategies that were employed by other photographers, particularly those of like post-war Japanese era, the way that they use different techniques to create a sense of dislocation, to point towards the trauma of their experiences through the literal ways that they were taking pictures, fracturing, and creating a grammar around that. And so, yeah, that darkness comes from my childhood, of course, but then also other areas that I'm interested in exploring and building, like I said, building a visual grammar around.
After we talked last week, and you mentioned Japanese post-war photographers, so I was looking at books by Daido Moriyama, who, for those of you who don't know, he photographed the streets of Tokyo in just an incredible way in the 60s and 70s, with World War II and sort of the American military presence very much a part of his pictures. But they are also really dark. They're really different than yours because they're quick street photos taken with a totally different kind of camera. And when you were just talking about memory now, I realized that I think one of the things I really love about your work is that there's your memory of things in your life, events in your life, but there's also this broader cultural memory that's kind of permeating the work. So I hope we're going to talk about that a little more. And one way into it might be to talk about haunting, because I think James used the word hauntology in the introduction, which both Shikeith and I were like, "Wow, that's a word." But of course, haunting is something we all are familiar with, and so I'm going to ask, what is your experience with haunting?
Yeah, well, hauntology is an area of focus for me. It's a philosophy by Jacques Derrida, which talks about how the past lingers in the present. And for me as an artist, I'm using that as a framework as it resonates with the Black experience, the lived Black experience, in the ways that those ephemeral presences from slavery and so forth continue to impact our daily lives. But not only that, there again is the personal, and the personal begins with my grandmother. Like I said, I grew up in a house in North Philly that right before I was born was haunted by ghosts. And my grandmother performed a ritual for me before I came into this world to make sure that the house was rid of ghosts. And you know, she is someone who I got the chance to interview before she passed away about the hauntings that she had dealt with in her life. She was haunted by, of course, these sort of like spectral experiences, but also narcotics and all kinds of other things that usually come out of growing up in environments that have these lingering presences, right? And also, on top of that, growing up with my grandmother, we would watch a lot of the History Channel, and we would watch documentaries about ghosts and ghost hunting and paranormal activity. And like I said, I was terrified to sleep in my room as a kid, and that's pretty much why, you know, because we were watching all these things as like a 6-year-old. It's an experience that like I've always wanted to bring into the work, and it just made sense for what I'm trying to talk about in terms of like Black men and Black queer men and our experiences here in America and elsewhere, but personally in America, where we are continuously facing so many forces that you might not see physically in front of you, but they're impacting us as we walk around outside, wherever we show up. And that's Black people in general. But it's also the way that you can think through the other side of hauntings, which are these sort of pathways towards uh, reclamation or healing, even though I sort of exist in the space of just like trying not to resolve things, like, you know what I mean? But there's the language of like how people sort of do away with the spirits, that I usually bring into the materiality, again, this visual grammar and the composition of materials that I work with, that point to those sort of like traces or practices that even like my grandmother employed before I was born. For instance, I use the color haint blue in my work often. And haint is just Southern vernacular for ghost. And this specific shade of blue was birthed on plantations and off the coast of the Carolinas, largely with the Gullah Geechee, who are people who I recently learned, you know, my family's ancestry is on St. Helena Island. And they would use the specific shade of blue, haint blue, to prevent those hauntings in their interior spaces. They would use it as a sort of border or boundary, where they would paint their porch ceilings this haint blue color. They would also paint their doorways, the frames of their doorways and windows this haint blue color, because ghosts can't cross water, and so it would not come inside of their interior spaces. And so interior spaces, interiority, I'm always sort of like using those languages of like diasporic spiritualities, my grandmother, and so forth, to create photographs, create sculptures, create installations, even like in phantasmatic apparatus. You see some of those sort of spiritual technologies that I've sort of like, that would go along with cleansing spaces and things like that, from those kinds of energies. So yeah, haunting, hauntology, it's all sort of weaved in, however way I sort of see fit, but yeah.
So haint blue, I guess, is sort of like a protective border in a way?
It is, yeah.
And is the blue in the video paint
Yeah.
blue?
Mhm.
So not everybody can see it, but I'm facing a wall that's one corner of the video. Shikeith made like an L-shaped video, and I really like this a lot.
Thank you.
So you can experience haint blue after we're done talking. You can come up and see it. And to refer back again to phantasmatic apparatus, which is one of the big pictures in the show, that for me speaks to a lot of the other pictures actually, because one of the strengths of this work, I think, is that there's magic, and there's also kind of a documentary, kind of a base level documentary quality to the work, just because of how you make your pictures. But there's also this infusion of magic and of history, and you don't resolve it for the viewer, right? Like you let all three of those elements just kind of come together in different ways.
Yeah, I'm always sort of like, I like to exist in this kind of like space in between. It's like we're getting ready, you know what I mean? Like we're getting ready to do the thing, versus being on the other side of it. Like I don't really fantasize about utopias and things like that. I like to think, I don't know, maybe it's the North Philly in me, but like I just like, we're getting ready for war. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think like that.
Well, you might be right.
Listen, but like, you know, I'm like, let's prepare for the battle. You know what I mean? And we have so many areas that we could look to. And just as an artist, I'm like, I like to kind of work kind of like an alchemist in sort of like blending all of these histories, past and future, unknown, together to kind of create these sort of like image compositions. And like, I don't know what it'll end up being, but like, it ends up being, again, in that space in between. Yeah.
Okay, so we have an optimist here who doesn't resolve things. And that's actually helpful to me because one of my questions for you is, when can haunting be good? Because I, especially around the other corner over there, there's this amazing group of pictures that I guess you and James together decided to put them together, but it's all portraits of men. Most of them are soldiers from many different periods of the 20th century or even earlier, the 19th century. And there's a preacher. That's a roundabout way to get to optimism because there's a lot going on there. But it seems to me that it's almost prescriptive, right? In that some of those pictures, because it's, oh gosh, how do I put this? These past lives, if you will, whether they're phantasmatic or real, historical, are still present, right? They are still operable, and that's a way to sort of redeem, even in the face of violence, in the face of unspeakable acts, or just suppression of lives, or of what people did. Ghosts coming back and haunting is a way to actually give them power again and give them strength.
Yeah, I think also I think a lot about that materially, with the materials that I use to create a lot of the images in the show. I am kind of doing a kind of resurrection of this sort of dead thing. A lot of the images were created with expired film. And like you mentioned in the beginning, it was sort of this kind of accident, right? But you sort of, I know there's a lot of artists in this here where you sort of those accidents can become something really potent for us to, bring in and push further. It could be the answer that you've been sort of searching for, right? So I guess you can say a lot of the film, the negatives, are good hauntings, or you know what I mean? That's when it could be good in that case, and just thinking materially and conceptually. But there's also sort of just, and I'm gonna probably mention my grandmother 5 million times, but she is definitely a sort of energy that surrounds me in the studio when I'm thinking. For instance, visiting hours, those lessons, those moments that linger from the past of us watching those cheesy, haunting documentaries on the History Channel and the Sci-Fi Channel. All of that can be good, but then there's also those hauntings within the archive, those gaps that get to kind of come back around through my use of found image. For instance, one of the photographs in the show is a found image. And yeah, I think that's also when it could be good. Also, it's sort of just, also, I think a lot about my grandfather and my uncle who participated in the Vietnam War. Even though I say I'm not interested in resolution, there is sort of a curiosity of their psychological experiences that went into those specific images that you're talking about in that corner. Wondering about what they went through quietly, and wanting to sort of allow it to release through my own sort of composition, through the sweat, through the eyes closed. Those sort of things are when I take the haunting of my sort of ancestral lineage and try to do some sort of work with a photograph to release them of that,
So let's stay with that corner of portraits for a few more minutes, because the found picture looks to me like a World War I era photo.
Yeah.
About 100 years ago now, actually more. And it's a black man, I presume a soldier, although he doesn't have any clothes on, so we're not like sure. And he's holding an American flag up, but this sort of like embroidered or crocheted American flag, right in front of his midsection. So, so in some ways he's extremely vulnerable. It also, to me, looks playful in a way, like he's being playful. So I think it's really an ambiguous picture. But then the other pictures that you made are, one of them looks like it could be Vietnam. Another one is clearly a trio of Civil War era soldiers. And then there's the preacher who is seems to be drenched in sweat. You talked about water as, being a barrier for haunts, for ghosts. So I don't know, how does that all come together? And sweat being part of water.
Yeah, so my interest in water, I'll just start from the beginning, because I have too many thoughts in my mind, and it just let me just calm down and start from the beginning. But my interest in water begins during my going into my second year of grad school at Yale, which is already stressful. Shout out to all my grad students in the building. It's a thing, right? But I had a horrible first year. I was gonna say first semester, I was gonna make it cute, but first year was horrible. And I ended up, meeting people in Connecticut, and we went up to a lake that summer. And I'm from Philly. We ain't got that many lakes around here, right? And so it was such a great experience to go up to a lake and make photographs of my people, and it stayed with me. On the car ride back, I'm like, this feels so good. Why do I feel so great about being near this body of water? And I took that with me in the studio, that feeling. I'm always chasing feeling and wanting to create form around feeling. And so I'm like, how do I replicate that experience and bring it into the composition, bring it into the language of materiality, right? And I just thought sweat. How do I make black men, black queer men, exist like this water? Let us become more malleable. Let us become more fluid, more boundless, like a spill. Notes Towards Becoming a Spill, my book. But that's sort of where it was birthed out of, just this experience, this feeling that I got by this blue space. And it's an experience that we can all experience, being in proximity to water. The metaphysical properties of that experience are helpful to your mental well-being. And so I just wanted to build, like I said, again, a visual language, a visual grammar around that experience, that feeling, and that was sweat. And that's moisture, and that's rivers and lakes and everything else. Mm-hmm. It's blue. It's history, and with those photographs in the corner, it's also about time. Water is time, right? And by way of using those expired films to create photographs, and those memories that weren't mine, but they were of my grandfather, my uncle, who were in Vietnam, and then learning about my family on St. Helena Island, and those men who probably participated in the Civil War. It's all sort of flowing back and forth. Mm-hmm. And for me, I am really interested in that kind of critical fabulation, which is sort of just imagining in the gaps of those archives or of those memories or experiences, because I didn't get to talk to my own grandfather about those experiences, but my grandmother would tell me like, oh, you know, that's sort of just like something that he would never really talk about. All I have is like photographs and documents and things like that of the experiences that him, my uncles, and my great-great-grandfathers have went through.
That,
yeah.
that brings me back to my question about whether haunting can be good, because I'm realizing listening to you that these are very nurturing pictures. They're nurturing, I think, for the viewer, but also for the bodies that are in them. And I've been thinking also a lot about what James Britt wrote in the introduction. And I mean, would it be fair to say that this body of work is really for Black men? In a way, it's almost like a nurturing gift.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been pretty obvious. I've been making work since, like 2014, and it's always sort of been grounded in the Black male experience, the experience of Black men. But I think people should engage across races, across ages. But I know that like in that specific sort of like, you know, in the studio, who I'm thinking about is this sort of legacy of Black men that came before me, who will come after me. Yeah, that's sort of always been what it is.
So I'm gonna take a turn now, but it's related. Another thing that really strikes me about this show in particular, but I think about all your work, is the importance that writers and writing seem to play in it. And so, you know, Visiting Hours is named after an Essex Hemphill poem. The title of the exhibition is taken from Beloved, from Toni Morrison's novel. When the audio is on, we hear Zora Neale Hurston, one of the great 20th century writers, talking about voodoo and other things. So talk to us about that. Why is writing so relevant to the pictures that you make?
You know, I do like to read, so that's why. But on like a very like superficial level, I guess, just reading and it sort of just authors who have impacted my own imagination. But also, I like to use the titles of my photographs or audio in my work and my video to create a kind of syllabus almost sometimes, where you'll learn that this title is inspired by a certain writer, and you're like, oh, maybe I should go read that poem. Maybe I should go read that book, that novel. And it's just, again, like just as much as I say that like the work is like for sure dedicated to Black men, Black queer men, so much of like the way that the cultural expression that I sort of like try to preserve through my work is sort of just boundless in terms of just like Black cultural producers and wanting to find ways to take them into the future with me, however the work survives. But obviously there's always the threat of those cultural producers being forgotten or erased, as we have seen most recently. But even before that, and these are people that inspire me, and so I'm hoping to create links, create intergenerational dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the nurturing that you say. They have nurtured me, so it's that kind of exchange.
Great.
I don't know Toni Morrison, but I love Toni Morrison, and I want to keep her language alive. So yeah.
Well, you did inspire me to read Essex Hempel's poems.
Oh,
so,
good.
so it's working, at least with this curator. And I have to tell everybody visiting ours, this beautiful photograph over here, that the poem it's named after is actually about a museum, which really made me laugh. Specifically, a guard who's on the night shift, walking around the museum. And here we are in a beautiful space looking at your pictures. So
Yeah.
there's a little circularity there.
It's also, again, my grandmother. I always have to shout her out. But like my grandmother, she told me about visiting hours, which haunting. There was like a period of time at around 4 a.m. where the dead could come back. And again, reasons why I was scared of the dark growing up and didn't want to sleep in my own room. But yeah, it's layered. It's layered. It's my grandmother. It's Essex Hempfield. Toni Morrison. Is everybody.
Well, it works. So thank you very much. I think we can actually open the floor up for questions. And you can ask questions too if you want to, of course. You can ask the audience questions or me. But yeah, anybody who wants to, don't be shy.
And it could be about the work, it could be about the journey, all of that. I feel like sometimes artist talks are always about like the work, but like talk about the journey as well. This is my first Philadelphia show, so.
Yeah, no, and that's exciting. I mean, kudos to Tilt, to James and Sarah, because you are a Philadelphia boy, and this is the first time your work has been shown.
Yeah, it is.
Tyler Shine, who worked with me at the Art Museum a number of years ago, did invite you to the museum. So you did a program there, but we didn't show your work. So, but that's when I first learned about you. That's like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I enjoyed looking at the book before this started, and I just wondered if you are, if there's a difference in how much you enjoy working on a book form, and if you're going to do something like that in the future, do more books.
Yeah, I hope so. It was a great experience working with Leslie Martin she was working at Aperture at the time, but now she's at Printed Matter. But yeah, my first monograph being released by Aperture was like yeah, I did the thing, right? But yeah, it was such a good experience. It was also challenging because so much of the work was made during the pandemic. And I have a very I'm looking for a word for isolated, not isolated, well, I'm just gonna use isolated. But like my studio practice is very like just me, the subject. Maybe sometimes I'll have an assistant, but it's usually very like intimate. That's the word I was looking for. And it's so a lot of those works were created during the pandemic. And in the course of the pandemic, it's like there's challenges with production and all kinds of stuff, which is nothing probably what you were interested in. But I would like to see what the experience is of like creating a story in the book form without all of that. But also, I feel like I am always interested in telling stories in general, whether that's through video or whether it's through images. But being able to create a book was a really great experience to do a kind of like amalgamation of all of those sort of ways of narrating a story and being able to make it something that's accessible to someone to pop on their their living room table. So hopefully I get an opportunity to do it again. I was gonna say something shady, but I'm not. But hopefully
A really encouraging publisher comes along, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
So you started with photo, right? That was your kind of starting point, but you've made a lot of sculptures.
Yeah.
And now video and film. Do you want to talk a little bit about how these different things come together or don't?
Yeah, for sure. I started making photographs in high school. It was called High Tech High, but the name now is Master Charter, which I'm sure Billy before are familiar with. I was the second graduating class. Uh, so I, I was inspired by my grandmother, not the grandma I've been talking about, but my dad's mom, who was also a photographer. And I always say she wouldn't call herself a photographer, but she was. She was the family archivist as well. And I would go to her house and I would sit at her dining table and rummage through Jet Magazine, Ebony Essence, and be inspired and start to sketch. And that was sort of like the early sort of like flame in terms of igniting my interest in images, my grandmother's table. And I continue to be inspired by other mediums, but also I should mention that like when I was in kindergarten, I had a great opportunity to participate in a school-wide competition where we sketched the city hall out of gold leaf, and that artwork won. In the school, I went to M. Hall Stanton, and that artwork went to exhibit as a kindergartner at the Philadelphia Art Museum.
All right.
And that was my first show.
So we have shown your work. Okay. This is number 2.
You
Sorry,
have shown
James.
the work. We have shown the work, but so it goes all the way back. But after high school, like I said, high school was when I started to really make pictures, and I got a camera, and I was doing a thing, and then I took that to college, and I went to Penn State University, and I continued to study photography there, and I felt like I also really needed to express myself outside of the 2D, and I started to make video and installation and bringing all of those things together, sculpture, of course, and I don't really limit myself in terms of what I explore in terms of medium. Yeah, I think I used to always think that I should probably like pick one, but I just feel like I have a lot to say across mediums, and there's always a through line, you know? And as I've gotten older, or matured in the studio rather, I love that I'm able to communicate the same thing 3 different ways, 4 different ways, you know?
Great.
I have a question there. Do you want a mic?
Hi.
So Philly came up a lot in the conversation tonight, and so I just wanted to know, like, what about the city inspires you? I know you've been away for some time, but what do you find like most inspiring about Philly? Like, I was having a conversation with the group chat, and they were bashing the city. And I'm like, you know, only place where natives talk so bad about the city. So just wanted to hear, like, what do you find inspiring about the city, and if Philly in some way shows up in your work and where?
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Philly, you know, so I always have that sort of hometown pride. And on the ride here, I rode by my middle school, and my middle school is off right across from like Freedom Theater, you know the area, right across from William Penn. And middle school is where I had some of the most craziest experiences that fueled a lot of the imagery in the early work, especially the balloon, because a lot of those experiences were traumatic, and I have always sort of wanted to use art to sort of like release myself of those traumatic experiences. But I would say Philly shows up And like I was saying, like sort of like the way that I've learned to be inventive. As a kid growing up in North Philly, we was just doing anything to make fun, right? To learn how to play, and that play carries itself into the studio. And the play is the one thing that's like really important, but also the courage. Like even though I went through those traumatic experiences, and I was riding by my middle school, and I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? But then it was like, no, you built some sort of courage, you know, from those experiences. So tap into that young boy that was growing up in Philly and embody that, you know. And not only in the work, Philly shows up when I'm navigating this art world. You know what I mean? And it's rough. It's rough, and you know, it's just like, you know, sometimes North Philly has to show up. You know what I mean? What you mean you're not paying me on time? You know, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. But even when like James came to my studio, I was doing a residency in Dumbo, and I was thinking about the ways that I could like create a show around Philly, and my experience around Philly. But it didn't necessarily happen right now, but I think it will happen. But I just think about like, even if it doesn't show up exactly in this show, I know that the next show, since I was simmering on it since those early visits, it will. But I'm just rambling at this point, but I love Philly. I hope to continue to show in Philly. Always trying to connect with people in Philly, to keep expanding. Yeah, but yeah, Philly, show love to your Philly artists. You know what I mean? So.
So, well, I bet you all want to get up and walk around and look at these pictures we've been talking about. So maybe it's a good time to do that.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Shikeith.
Thank you.
This is a great show. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
And I bet Shikeith would be willing to answer a few of your questions if you want to ask
Of course.
one-on-one.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, Sarah. Great experience for my first ever Philly debut. Hopefully it continues on. So,
Thank you, Tilt.
thank you, Tim.
And I didn't ask you why you're wearing a New York Yankees hat.
Oh,
so
that's just fashion,
we'll
baby.
just leave it at that.
That is just fashion. That's fashion. I don't even know the players, child. So, thank you.
I'll just send you a text.
You had a good turnout, though. It's like, that's the one thing I notice about film. Like, people come out to stuff. They'll just go to random talks.